We are slaying monsters.
Don't let the ghosts and the ghouls disturb you, darling.
Popsicles in the shape of Bigfoot.
Why?
Sasquatch-cicles.
That's great. Excellent.
Sasquatch-cicles.
Sasquatchicles. Wait, what?
Sasquatch-cicles.
Sasquatch-cicles. Oh, God. Good. Okay. I think you can definitely make a fortune. I think you should sell the house and give everything away and just live your dreams.
It's the best idea.
It sounds like something that, like, Cherry Garcia, help me out, Ben and Jerry's. Sounds like something that Ben and Jerry's would come up with.
Did you say Cherry Garcia?
Yeah,
as if his name is not Jerry Garcia.
Well,
you know his name's Jerry Garcia.
I know
right?
his name is Jerry Garcia, but I had to say Cherry Garcia because otherwise I would have never gotten Ben and Jerry's.
Yeah, it is a very Ben and Jerry's type of flavor name, right? Sasquatch-cicles.
Yeah, I totally feel like they would have that, like, and also like Champ, you know, like the Lake Monster Champ. They'd have like chocolate Champ.
We could do a whole line of cryptid themed frozen desserts.
Yeah. Oh, and is the Sasquatch-cicle shaped like a foot? Because it should be.
Oh, in my mind, it was shaped like a Sasquatch. In fact, quite a bit like the Minnesota Iceman.
Oh.
Look at that segue.
What a great segue. Why'd you even bring that up?
I hope you know.
I know. You're supposed to say, because that's what we're talking about today. The Minnesota Iceman. Dumbass. It's okay. Okay, wait. Across the table, we've got Matt.
Hey.
And this is EJ, and we are slaying monsters. Today, we're going to talk about the Minnesota Iceman. All right.
Yeah. EJ, what do you know about the Minnesota Iceman?
Well, you had me look at some pictures just earlier. So I know that it's like a Sasquatch in a block of ice.
Yes.
And I know that it's a Minnesota thing, and that is literally all I know.
You know the two pieces of information that you could take from the title, Minnesota Iceman.
Pretty much, yeah.
Great.
Yep, we're starting off strong.
Awesome. Love it. No. So in the late 1960s, an ice-encased corpse surfaced in Rollingstone, Minnesota. It was humanoid, hairy, and unlike anything zoologists had ever seen. Dubbed the Minnesota Iceman, it's been classified as both a neanderthal and a Sasquatch before being revealed as a carnival hoax. But to this day, researchers and Sasquatch fans still debate over the authenticity of the frozen body. The subsequent investigation and reporting became so heated that it shattered the friendship of the two founders of cryptozoology. This is one of the most fascinating and famous footnotes in Sasquatch and cryptozoological history, and this will be our topic for the next few weeks.
Cool.
Our primary source for this entire series will be Bernard Heuvelmann's seminal publication, Neanderthal, The Strange Saga of the Minnesota Iceman, translated by Paul LeBlanc, and Hunting Monsters, Cryptozoology and the Reality Behind the Myths by Darren Naish. Today, specifically, I'll be using an article titled Memories of Chicago by Norm Nabholz, published on Cosmopolitan, which is just as funny as it sounds.
Oh my God. Is it like how to get your man as a cow? Is it like, make these noises in bed? Don't make moo noises.
I mean, it'd be amazing if it was that. Yeah. No, it's a farm and agriculture magazine.
And it's called Cosmopolitan?
Yeah, of course.
Okay, I'm really upset that it's not about how to be a pretty cow.
Well, you could start your own magazine. It should be. That's very BoJack Horseman.
It
Cosmopolitan magazine.
Yeah, it is. That's what I thought. I thought it was like a joke magazine.
Yeah, it's like Manatee Fair, right? They had Manatee Fair.
Manatee Fair. Yes. Although
we will be talking primarily about Minnesota, we are going to start in New York City. In 1842, Phineas Taylor P.T. Barnum opened Barnum's American Museum on the corner of Broadway, Park Row, and Ann Street. If you visited the museum, you'd get to see Charles Sherwood Stratton, a man with dwarfism billed as General Tom Thumb. You'd also get to see Josephine Clofulia, the bearded woman, and William Henry Johnson, who was called Zip the Pinhead because a congenital disease caused him to be born with a small head. Barnum also kept live animals and treated them like shit, so the less we talk about that, the better. Despite the large 5-story space, the area was crammed full and left little room for the poor animals to live. His trainers used bull hooks, which look... Do you know what a bull hook is? They look kind of like canes, like with the crook.
Oh, yeah.
But they have a sharpened handle, and the trainers would use them to just pull and drag the animals around stage.
Horrible.
Yeah. You're going to say that a lot as we talk about P.T. Barnum. P.T. Barnum's a piece of shit.
Yeah. He seemed... I do know that much. I do know
he's
that
a piece of shit.
He was a piece of shit.
In addition to the human oddities and his abused animals, Barnum showcased taxidermied animals, sometimes real and sometimes not. So, you would just have essentially corpses of animals that were stuffed or maybe dried or something like that. But famously, he showed the Fiji mermaid. You know about the Fiji mermaid, EJ?
Oh, yes. I think I even got to see it.
Well, so the Fiji mermaids, it's a weird thing because initially Barnum's Fiji mermaid was the Fiji mermaid. And then kind of like Xerox or Kleenex or something like that, it became the name that was given to any taxidermy creation mermaid.
Oh, okay.
So you got to see a Fiji mermaid because they are all called Fiji mermaids now.
Okay.
But the original Fiji mermaid was the one in New York City at this time. We saw that in Berlin, Maryland at the Mermaid Museum, by the way.
Yes, we did. That was pretty cute.
Yeah, it was cute. It's like a little one-room museum. It's not, it's not, there's not a whole lot there because there's not that much you can have as a mermaid museum, but it was really cool. And they had more art than I thought they would, which was awesome.
The art, it was a little bit leaning toward appealing to kids.
Yeah.
Which I did not know. I should have freaking known. A mermaid museum, of course there's going to be freaking kids there. But anyway, I did appreciate the art on the walls. Like some of the art was so breathtaking that they have of mermaids. It's beautiful. Yeah.
And then they also had a whole wall that was dedicated to mermaid sightings throughout history and all the different instances where people had seen mermaids.
That was so cool. And it went all the way back to ancient times.
Yes.
It was so cool.
And all the way up to like the 2010s, I think, or something like that. Like it was really surprisingly recent that people were still seeing mermaids.
Yeah, it was super cool.
So Barnum's Fiji mermaid was created by attaching a monkey's body to a fish's tail. The mermaid likely came from Japan. However, Barnum claimed that it had been caught by the fictional Dr. J. Griffin in South America. See, what happened in reality was Barnum rented the Fiji mermaid, this taxidermied animal, from its owner, Moses Kimball, who was in Boston. In a very, very elaborate ruse, Barnum had one of his museum employees assume the role of Dr. J. Griffin, who, remember, doesn't exist. This employee took the mermaid to Philadelphia, where they displayed it for a week as Dr. J. Griffin. Then Barnum very publicly contacted Dr. J. Griffin and asked to host the mermaid at his museum in New York. And of course, the doctor agreed.
Okay. He's a real man of illusion, isn't he?
He really is, right? So this whole ruse, he's the showman, right? Barnum, from the very beginning, he's the showman.
Yeah.
And he knew that if he just went and showed this dried out animal, again, it's just a monkey attached to a fish, right? Museum guests, they would assume that it had been created by someone, that it was fake, and they'd just move on with their lives, right? But this way, with him catching wind of the thing, quote unquote, he like, oh, wow, there's a mermaid being displayed. And then going there saying, oh, can I host it in my museum? Publicly haggling over the price that he was going to pay this fake doctor, all of it. It made it seem authentic. Barnum understood that the story behind the gaffe was more important than the gaffe itself. Mm-hmm. Right?
Smart dude.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
By the way, a gaffe, EJ, I think you know this, but a gaffe is like a it's a term for like a carnival illusion or a prop. We'll use that term a lot.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Barnum's American Museum was incredibly popular. At its peak, it boasted 15,000 visitors a day.
Wow.
Millions of people came to see these attractions. So many that Barnum, as he was, trying to funnel more people through and get more people to buy tickets and stuff like that, he found that they were lingering too long at his exhibits. So he started posting signs in the museum that said, "This way to egress." And the visitors, because a lot of the visitors, they kind of lacked a formal education, they didn't know what the word egress meant. So they followed the signs thinking like, oh, I'm going to go see a bird or some other exhibit. Yeah. And what really happened is it dumped them out the back door of the museum.
Oh, wow. This is before the gift shop idea, I think.
Oh, yeah. There was no gift shop. Yeah. He was just trying to move people out of the museum so he could move more people in.
Holy crap, dude. So he assumed that they all didn't know what egress meant.
Right. Yeah.
I guess it could sound like an egret.
And although that is a cute story, it's worth pointing out that Barnum was a total fucking bastard. In 1835, Barnum literally bought a blind, paralyzed woman named Joyce Heth and toured her around for the last year of her life.
What?
This is a woman of color, by the way. And he bought her as a slave, is what he did.
Basically.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
What the fuck?
Yeah.
Holy shit, this guy.
He claimed that she was George Washington's nurse, originally from Madagascar, and made her tell audiences stories about the former president. It gets better, or worse. After Joyce Heth died, Barnum sold tickets to her fucking autopsy.
What?
Yeah.
Oh, this guy.
Yes.
Seriously, say no more about this. This guy is a total piece of shit.
I will say more.
Okay.
To quote the asshole himself, "Nobody ever lost $1 by underestimating the taste of the American public." Now, during the Civil War, the Confederate Army tried to burn down his museum.
Oh. Probably not because of any moral high ground. But
No, they were just trying to burn New York.
Yeah, they were just burning. Mm-hmm. Okay, well,
Confederate Army burned a lot.
I still can't root for them even then. They probably loved everything that he did. He just happened to have a freaking museum in the North.
Yeah, they probably did. I mean, also, we just kind of glossed over like his other human oddities. And I know that it was a different time and people were kind of fascinated. And even here in Philly, you used to go and you used to watch the people at there's that
it's the
asylum.
Is it the Pennsylvania hospital?
The Pennsylvania hospital that was like an asylum at the time, and you would watch the people like wander around the courtyard.
Yeah, you could pay money to the hospital and they'd let you watch the people walk around.
Yeah. So, I mean, it was a different time, but it's still, like, that doesn't excuse it.
No, definitely not. Because there were plenty of good people at that time, too, that were probably like, this is disgusting. It should not be.
Totally.
Yeah.
So, anyway, the Confederate Army tried to burn down his museum. They failed, unfortunately.
It's a good thing they weren't very good at stuff.
Right. Yeah, right. However, less than a year later, a fire started in a nearby restaurant and quickly spread to the surrounding buildings. And the museum was destroyed, taking 9 other buildings with it. The incident, unfortunately, must have been terrifying for the abused animals that lived there because most of them burned alive.
Oh, no. Trigger warning, everybody.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, we'll do that. Oh, my God.
It was really unfortunate.
Okay.
So, after this, Barnum, he's lost his museum. He's lost his major moneymaker, right? He took his act on the road, and he started doing a traveling circus, and this was the birth of the traveling circus.
By the way, circuses burn up quite easily. He just kind of made his business a little bit more flammable.
Yeah, the tents are kind of flammable, right?
They're very flammable.
So he didn't learn a lesson.
He
Whatever.
didn't learn a thing.
So Barnum was traveling with feats of acrobatics, animal handling, and the sideshow continued to showcase human oddities, curios, like these people with birth defects, and his taxidermied animal hybrids.
Now, I think this is where they had, because you mentioned that some of the human beings that he had as his sideshow. One of them was maybe Elizabeth Green. You never heard of her?
No, who's Elizabeth Green?
So she was a part of the sideshow act. I don't know if she was part of this sideshow act, but you know the movie Freaks?
Oh, she's the stork woman.
Yeah.
Oh, I do know about her. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if she was running in these circles at that time.
Oh, wow.
I think that might have been a little bit
I think they were all
on.
dead at that time.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking now.
Yeah.
But wasn't she in it?
She was.
That's what I thought.
Elizabeth
Okay.
Green, the stork woman. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, she had a genetic condition that was responsible for a long, thin nose and thin bone structure.
Okay. Should be a runway model today.
Yeah, she was also billed as Cuckoo the Bird Girl. Yeah. She toured with Ringling Brothers.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay, so different.
Yeah, not Barnum.
Those guys were different.
Right.
Okay. They're all the fucking same to me.
I mean, they kind of are, right?
Yeah. Okay, I just wanted to point that out because we have similar names. I thought it was cool. All right. Yeah, even though I'm E.J. Green, my name is also Elizabeth, so I have the same name.
Right.
Yes.
As Elizabeth Green, the stork woman.
Yes.
So, the fate of the Fiji mermaid, Barnum's prized possession, it was likely destroyed in the fire and got replaced by a new model. There is a version of this animal on display at Harvard's Peabody Museum. And this was apparently donated to the museum by the family of Moses Kimball after his death. He was, of course, the true original owner of it. Now, there's debate over the authenticity of the one in the Peabody Museum. And by authenticity, I want to be clear that I mean if it's the original that Barnum had, or if it's a duplicate. Not authenticity as in, is it a real mermaid? It's not a real mermaid, right? It's a monkey attached to a fish. Right. But we call these chimeras, right? When you have an animal, like part of one animal, part of another stuck together. So we don't know if that was the original, or if the original got lost or destroyed by fire or whatever. The one that's in the Peabody Museum doesn't really seem to fit Barnum's description of the mermaid, which had, quote, its arms thrown up, giving the appearance of dying in agony. Now, of course, Barnum's original description could have been fabricated, because Barnum fabricated shit all the time, right? It's very likely, though, that the original Fiji mermaid was just lost to time or perished in the fire. Whatever the fate of the original, P.T. Barnum helped to usher in a brand new kind of act, rogue taxidermy. Although the phrase was actually coined in 2002, the concept of combining chimeras or hybrid animals is much, much, much older. You see like the jackalopes of the Old West made by adding horns onto rabbits, or the griffins, right?
Yeah.
Famously created with bird heads and wings on feline bodies.
Yeah. I thought the jackalope was real when I was a kid.
That's awesome. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you can buy them. Like, people will sell taxidermied rabbits with horns.
Yeah, I mean, when you're just a little kid and you're seeing all these weird chimera creatures around, you're like, sure, that's real.
Yeah.
Because you don't know.
There is a griffin that is a lion body and an eagle head that is in a museum in Denmark that I saw an image for years ago, and I've been like desperate to track down this museum and find this griffin. It's just one of those things that I saw in a book somewhere someday and was like, oh my God. And this was like my burgeoning interest in cryptozoology. And I was like, I gotta go find this thing. And I haven't been able to. I've been unsuccessful thus far.
In getting to Denmark?
And figuring out what museum it is.
Yeah.
Because I don't really know.
So there's one that I think I saw in real life when I went to Ireland called, I think it was in Bunratty Castle.
Okay.
Which I think is near Limerick or in Limerick, somewhere around that area. There was a chimera there. That's all. That's my fucking story.
Was it
it's
a griffin?
Fascinating.
What was it?
Yeah, it was like it was hanging off of the It was a chandelier, actually, which was really odd.
Oh,
It was
that's
hanging.
cool.
Yeah, and it was like maybe 3 animals put together. Definitely some definitely some antlers.
Okay.
And it might not be there. I don't know. And I honestly could have been making it up in my head now, but I'm pretty sure there was some kind of chimera creature hanging off of the ceiling in one of the rooms above like a table.
Oh, that's super cool.
Yeah, I think I have a picture of it somewhere.
Nice.
Yeah.
And you know about the Brno dragon, right?
No.
We'll probably end up talking about this because I'll probably do something on dragons at some point.
Yeah.
We'll definitely talk about the lindworm at some point, whatever. But there is a town, Brno, in the Czech Republic that was plagued by a dragon, they say, and they have a taxidermied crocodile hanging in one of their halls.
Oh.
That was the dragon of Brno.
Oh. What was a crocodile doing there?
It probably came from Egypt. It was probably like a Nile crocodile and I don't think it was plaguing the town. I think somebody killed a crocodile and brought it back, and then the legend formed because they had this mounted crocodile in the hall.
Right.
But yeah, it's like backwards, right?
Totally, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, it's funny how those stories sort of evolve that way. We're going to talk more about evolving stories.
Oh, great.
Barnum's Traveling Circus, complete with rides, games, performances.
Holy shit, I do not trust the rides of the 1830s.
Dude, also the rides that this fucking guy designed.
Seriously, no thanks.
We're further on now because his museum burned down after the Civil War.
Oh,
so
yeah.
we're talking about like the 1860s, 70s
then
at
it's
this
fine.
point. But yeah, I mean, it's no better.
Yeah, OSHA was on fire back then, so they were covering it.
Yeah.
It was fine.
But these became the blueprint for traveling carnivals all over the country. The accompanying sideshow often had these grotesque, morbid, just a little scary, right? Mm-hmm. And this became a new form of entertainment for Americans. And people flocked to see these curios, these oddities. But by the 1950s or 60s, about half a century later, the popularity of this entertainment was beginning to wane. Guess why?
The civil rights movement, probably. Because people started to give a shit about other people. I don't know.
That may be partially true. I'd like to believe that that's true. Television also plays a huge role.
Oh, was it television?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah, because you don't have to go out anymore.
My research was television.
It was television,
People stopped
yeah.
going to the circus and the carnival because of television.
Okay, not because they all gained a conscience all of a sudden.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, because now you're sitting on your couch, you get a quick fix of entertainment, right?
Yeah.
The performers, who are already known as being like vagabonds, they change in that 50, 70 year period, and they start to become really creepy and really weird. The sideshow was always weird to begin with, and the entire carnival kind of took on this air now that it's just strange, right? Their transient lifestyle is in very stark contrast to our mid-century family-focused, live at home, work, come home, that aesthetic, right? Mm-hmm. Ray Bradbury, famous horror writer, right? Sci-fi writer. He published the story Something Wicked This Way Comes in 1962. Are you familiar with this?
Yeah, I'm familiar with the story.
Yeah,
somewhat.
it tells the story of a dark carnival, which is a term that Bradbury coined 15 years before this. And his ideas of like latent magic, malicious sorcerers, evil consequences, they really reflect the way the population was starting to feel about carnivals at the time. And I think there's a likely reason why we find transient gatherings like this so unnerving. Because I think it plays into liminality. You familiar with the concept of liminality?
Right, yeah, transitory places.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, it's just one of those things that's like hardwired into our psyche, right? It's the reason that we find like empty hallways, staircases, bus stops, and train stations. It's creepy. They're creepy, right? They feel like you're moving from one space to the next. They don't really have their own identity. They just sort of temporarily exist to get you from point A to point B.
Yeah.
The carnivals are the same way. It's like you exist in this time, right? You have this group of performers. They all have these unique backgrounds and personalities. Touch our lives for a few days, few weeks, and then they disappear forever.
Yeah.
We don't know their story. we don't get time to like learn about them. They're just gone one day. And they leave this empty space, and all that you remember are like, oh, things were weird there. Like they had these oddities, these sorts of things, right? Mm-hmm. Also, they have clowns, and clowns are fucking scary.
Yeah. They were different back then too.
Yeah. Yeah, clowns were different back then. Mm-hmm. They were scary.
Well, they're
scary now.
They're scary now, yeah, but they're just a different kind of scary, I guess. Because, yeah, back then it was more the tramp and there were different types of clowns, but one type of clown, I think, was the tramp.
Yeah, right? The tramp was absolutely a clown. Well, that's the Charlie Chaplin type clown. He was the tramp clown. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, like the wanderer, vagabond kind of. So all of this carnival sideshow thing leads us not to a carnival, but to Chicago. Now, throughout the 20th century, a very large farm show took place every year in the Windy City. That's Chicago. This was considered one of the most important farm shows in the United States, and livestock breeders from all over the continent came to show off their animals and to purchase animals there. Think about Chicago in the 1940s, 50s, 60s. To set this scene, right? This farm show takes place near the Chicago stockyards in the South Side. This is Chicago's blue-collar section, populated by meat-packing plants, factories, mills, that sort of thing. Now, the 20th century also saw a migration of black citizens to the area, and a community of black-owned businesses and culture developed there as well on the South Side. By the mid-1960s, Mayor Richard Daley, who was elected on a platform of racial segregation, built an expressway through the center of the South Side, purposefully dividing the black and white communities. Ugh. He also built public housing in less desirable neighborhoods to help curtail people of color from moving into the white neighborhoods.
Right, so a real piece of shit.
Yeah.
Okay.
They called this the State Street Corridor, and this zone contained the densest concentration of public housing in all of America at the time. Meanwhile, on the other side of Chicago, the entrenched Irish gangs oversaw the dealings on the South Side. The infamous Chicago outfit, this is originally run under Al Capone, right?
Yes.
They still had a substantial foothold there in the 1960s. So the Chicago outfit, through totally legal union practices, boosted support for John F. Kennedy and helped get him elected in 1961. Wow. Yeah. Totally legal practices.
Well, you know what? He was a good guy, so maybe in the end it all washes out okay.
Right. Anyway. That's a fascinating side note to all of this. The original gang that became the Chicago outfit was called Reagan's Colts, okay? So follow me on this journey for a second. Reagan's Colts, they were an athletic club in Chicago, all right? And they quickly got into politics and started influencing elections in the 20s and 30s, all right? The leader of the gang, Frank Reagan, even became police commissioner, because what could possibly go wrong with that, right?
Yeah.
After getting very heavily involved in bootlegging and starting a race riot, they had a very unfriendly exchange with Al Capone. But Al Capone loved their gumption, and he folded them into his legitimate business dealings, where they became part of his criminal syndicate. And then, in the 1920s, several members left the gang and formed, I shit you not, the Chicago Cardinals football team. And they later moved to Arizona, and that's the Arizona Cardinals.
Are you freaking kidding me?
That's the Arizona Cardinals.
Holy shit.
Yep.
So that's the origin of
that's the origin of the Arizona Cardinals. They were originally the Chicago Cardinals, and they were started by Frank Reagan of Reagan's Colts.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Wow, dude, that's crazy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
All right, so we got to get back to cows.
Yeah.
Got to get back to cows. So you have to understand that every year, right? This is all just to set the background for all of this. But every year, this racially segregated and gang-infused section of Chicago was suddenly filled with farm boys looking for livestock. Huh. Right? Like, The week after Thanksgiving, this is when it always happened, the week after Thanksgiving, thousands of Midwestern ranchers from all over the entire continent, they arrive in Chicago and they bring with them their prized cattle for sale. Some of them are there to purchase. They're bringing chickens. They're bringing all kinds of stuff, right?
Okay, yeah.
For many of them, this is probably their first experience in a big city in their lives.
Yeah.
Imagine what a mind fuck that must have been.
A lot of mob, like a big mob presence. Although I don't know if they'd even know if they'd saw.
Would you know? Probably not,
I
right?
wouldn't know.
Yeah.
But they probably saw a lot of big buildings and dense streets that they weren't used to.
And you're walking through these like racially segregated neighborhoods.
Well, that was probably no different for them.
Mob blocked. Well, there wouldn't have been neighborhoods if you're out on your farm.
That's
somewhere.
true. That's true.
You know, and you turn the corner and you're suddenly on a block that's like completely owned by the mob. Like it must have been nuts.
Must have been interesting for them. I hope they weren't just wandering around the streets with their cow, like lost. Like, where do
Some of them were.
Some of them were. Aw.
Yeah.
Can I get on the subway with my cow? Aw.
1967, Chicago International Livestock Festival. A man is there. We don't know what his name was. He was a friend of Terry Cullen. Terry Cullen, he was a herpetologist, which means that he specialized in reptiles, not herpes. According to a 2010 interview in Milwaukee's Shepherd Express, Cullen devoted his life to working with exotic reptiles specifically. By the time he was 15, he'd written a paper on venomous snakes. He focused on husbandry and conservation, saying that he was, quote, trying to find out as much as I could before these animals disappeared forever, and trying to find ways of preventing that from happening. Cullen still works in that field. He runs the Dragonwood Wildlife Conservancy, which is a 501c3 charity based in Florida.
Oh, so he's still doing it.
He's still doing it. He's still alive.
He was ahead of his time back then, thinking about that stuff.
They travel to conventions and they display their animals for education, and they help to raise awareness about reptile conservation, all of that. They also take donations via PayPal in case any of our listeners want to toss our scaly friends a few bucks.
Yeah.
So Terry Cullen, he's a young man at the time, and he gets a call from his friend who's at the Chicago Livestock Festival. His friend wants to tell him that he's seen something remarkable. He saw the body of what looked like a man covered in hair and frozen in a block of ice. And Cullen, this gets him really excited because Cullen saw the same exhibit just a few months before in August. Remember, this is in November. Cullen had saw this in August.
Oh.
Cullen was at the Wisconsin State Fair when he saw it. He described the so-called Iceman in the Bernard Heuvelmann's book Neanderthal like this. It was between 1.5 and 1.65 meters, 5 to 5.5 feet, covered entirely by long, dark brown hair, had a sagittal crest on the top of its head, but no prominent canines or opposable big toe. So the sagittal crest that he refers to, do you know what that is?
Is it like a literal crest on your head?
Yeah, so it's a bone ridge.
Yeah, okay.
That runs from the forehead to the back of the skull.
Okay, yeah, that's what I pictured. Okay.
It supports the jaw muscles in creatures that need to deliver like very powerful bites.
Oh, like the Dilophosaurus.
Yeah, I mean, you see it in T-Rexes,
Yeah,
right?
you see it in dinosaurs.
Yeah, T-Rexes, dogs, wolves, cats, lions. You know where else you find it?
No.
What other animals group you find it in?
Sharks.
Great apes.
Oh.
Like gorillas, orangutans. Most important to our story, you also find it in early humans, like ones from the Paranthropus genus.
Oh, they're my favorite.
Oh,
also,
yeah?
I'm really upset I said sharks when you were obviously leading us to apes. I'm tired today, everybody. I'm sorry.
It's all right.
Such a dumbass.
That's a different story. You're like, we're going into the water. We're going to talk about the Kraken.
We're talking about sharks today, right?
We got there. It's fine.
We got there. Forget that ever happened. But no. Now that I'm thinking about it, the Paranthropus boisei, or however you say it, that's my favorite one.
Well, guess what?
Oh, is it based on that?
The best known of these early humanoids. It's probably Paranthropus boisei.
Yay!
Yeah. Also called Australopithecus boisei.
Australopithecus.
Right?
Yes, they're my favorite. You know why they're my favorite?
Why?
Because they sit around and they just ate grass.
They absolutely did.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's what I'm going to talk about. That's funny.
Awesome. Well, that's why they died out. Okay, I'll stop talking now.
No,
That's why
please
they
go
didn't
ahead.
make
yeah.
it very far, I think, because they weren't able to really like go beyond just sitting around and eating their grass. They weren't like their cousins.
They weren't developing, right?
They weren't developing.
You're right. Yeah. So as the other hominids at the time were actually working on tools and things like that, they were just sitting around eating.
Yeah, which I love them for that. I love that energy. I would have totally been one of them.
Yeah. First described in 1959 by Mary Leakey, the boisei. They were discovered in Tasmania. They're short, with these big, powerful jaws, right?
You're adorable, too.
Mostly they ate grasses, roots, and their powerful bite allowed them to eat nuts and harder foods. They may have made rudimentary stone tools and may have butchered animals that they killed, and they may have used bone tools, although those are very rare things to find in excavations. They had these big forward-set eyes, broad cheeks, and heavy brows. Now, they didn't have much for incisors, and instead they had very flat teeth, right?
Like cows.
Like cows, exactly. And that meant that they couldn't, like, rip when they bit, but instead they chewed large quantities of food, just like cows. So you would be, like, shoveling handfuls of grass and berries and nuts in your mouth. So they weren't using their bite as a weapon, is what I'm saying, right?
Yeah.
Now, Terry Cullen, our reptile guy, he had encountered what appeared to be the boisei twice. Once in August at the Wisconsin Fair, and now again at the Chicago Livestock Festival through his unnamed friend. Being a very curious dude and a speculative researcher, this hairy Iceman fascinated him, and he knew just who to contact to give this information to. So 3 days later, the phone rang in a New York City home of Ivan Terrence Sanderson. Do you know anything about Ivan T. Sanderson?
Well, when you say it like that, Ivan T. Sanderson, that sounds very familiar to me. But that's all I got for you.
All right. Sanderson is widely known as a founder of cryptozoology. He's also the kind of guy who looks at a pointy twig in the forest and wonders if it's ever been used to kill a vampire. I mean, he's got an imagination like no one else on him. And given his upbringing, I can't really blame him. And to be fair to Sanderson, his imagination made him think about the world in a completely different way than a lot of the traditional zoology that was going on at the time. Sanderson was born in Scotland in 1911, and his father was a whiskey maker. Now, his father was also a naturalist in his own right, and that's Arthur Buchanan Sanderson. He founded the first game reserve in Kenya.
Whoa.
Yeah. While participating in a filming expedition near Lake Marsabit, Arthur surprised a herd of rhinoceros, hoping to give the cameras a good shot. But one of the rhinos charged Arthur and gored him.
Ooh.
He was flown to Nairobi for medical attention, but succumbed to his wounds on February 19th, 1925. His son, Ivan T. Sanderson, was just 14 at the time of his father's death. So you think about this kid who, his father founded this place in Kenya that was like supposed to be a game reserve, a place for the animals, right? And you see him get killed by this force of nature. And you have to understand how that would influence the kid, right? Seeing that how powerful it is that it could just take your father like that, like nothing, right?
Yeah. Was he there?
No.
Oh, okay.
And he grew up with this like fascination about the natural world after that. Yeah. And very quickly he starts to follow in his father's footsteps. He spent the 1920s and 30s traveling to exotic places. By 1932, he led an expedition through West Africa along with Gerald Walter Russell, a Royal Navy admiral. Sanderson describes their journey in his book Animal Treasure, which is one of his many naturalist writings. At one point during their expedition, Sanderson and Russell arrive at what he calls the Enco village on the Cross River. This would put him, according to my calculations, pretty much in the center of Nigeria, okay? Just for place reference. They're short on food, they're making their camp, and Sanderson and Russell, they decide to head out into the river and try to shoot some fruit bats.
Okay. Not what I would have wanted to go eat.
Well, you kind of have the same reaction, but the bats can get up to a foot long, so they have some good meat on them.
Oh, that makes it okay then, and very delicious sounding. A foot-long bat. Even better.
Yeah, it's the new Subway hoagie. Yeah, Subway, foot-long bat.
Yeah, cook me up that foot-long bat. Yes, you sold me on that.
So, Sanderson and Russell, they wade into the river. They start taking shots at bats. And they bring down a hammerhead bat. EJ, have you ever seen a hammerhead bat?
Actually, I want to say I might have, but you'll have to just show me.
It's a hammerhead bat.
Aww, it's so cute. That doesn't look appetizing at all.
Yeah, they have that funny nose, right?
Yeah, that's very cute.
So, hammerhead bats, they can get really big. They can have like a 3-foot wingspan. So
Wow.
they're big bats, right?
Yeah.
They shoot one of these larger bats and their quarry falls into the water. And Sanderson, he leaves his gun on the riverbank and he wades into the water to retrieve it, getting deeper and deeper. And then according to his account, he lost his footing because he stepped on a tortoise. So he lost his footing because he stepped on a tortoise. And suddenly he gets caught up in the river's current and he starts heading downstream. So he's panicking, right?
Yeah.
Behind him, he hears Russell scream, "Look out."
Oh, jeez.
And just as Sanderson is regaining his footing, getting back on his feet, something flew at him. And he describes it this way. "Then I let out a shout also, and instantly bobbed down under the water, because coming straight at me, only a few feet above the water, was a black thing the size of an eagle. I had only a glimpse of its face, yet that was quite sufficient, for its lower jaw hung open and bore a semicircle of pointed white teeth set about their own width apart from each other. When I emerged, it was gone. George was facing the other way, blazing off with his second barrel." So first off, blazing off with his second barrel is about the best euphemism for masturbation I've ever heard.
That would have been an odd reaction to that event, but you know what? I don't want to judge the guy.
But secondly, what the hell kind of horror movie was happening here, right?
Yeah, so wait, what was he really doing, though? Was he shooting?
Yeah, he was shooting. He was shooting at this goddamn giant bat.
Okay, so this was a bat that he thinks he saw.
It was just this flying monstrosity.
Okay.
All I can imagine as I like read this scene was that scene from Van Helsing with Hugh Jackman, where that CGI bat women are like flying all over the place and screaming. Like, this giant bat dive bombs them again, at which point Sanderson and Russell decide it's time to get the fuck out of there. They return to camp and they describe what they saw to one of the local hunters. And when they ask him, like, what the hell kind of bat was that? He responds, "Ola tiao," as if this was like a commonly seen animal. And this leads us to a fascinating footnote in cryptozoological history. So the Ola tiao, also called the ahul in Indonesia, have been described as giant flying creatures. They're initially described as massive bats, but their history and pseudobiology quickly gets folded into the emerging dinosaur frenzy of the 20th century. Remember, we discussed this in our Surgeon's Photograph episode. But basically, like, the Western world's in a dinosaur craze in the 1920s and 30s, right? Between popularity of paleontology, the rise of natural history museums, and movies like King Kong, The Lost World, dinosaurs are on everybody's mind, right? So, really, it's no surprise that Sanderson's sighting gets reclassified as another flying creature, a pterosaur, or a pterodactyl, right?
Okay.
So, Frank Welland, another naturalist exploring Africa, described the Kongamato, or the overwhelmer of boats. That's how he translates the word Kongamato, as overwhelmer of boats. In his book, Witch-Bound Africa, he cites the Kanodi tribes of the Congo region, who describe it as reddish-brown and a featherless flying beast.
Ooh.
Yeah.
So it's not a bat?
Well, I don't know. They were hunting bats. We know that he shot a hammerhead bat. They can have a 3-foot wingspan. Mm-hmm. They can get bigger, you know? If you look at these bats, their faces, they like resemble kind of horses, right? They have these pronounced noses, snouts. Yeah. They have, they're resonating chambers is what they are in their noses. And that helps to amplify their vocalizations. Sanderson, he claims he slipped on a tortoise, right? Which sounds much better than I stepped wrong in the river and fell down.
Yeah.
I don't think it would be far-fetched to think that someone being carried away by a river current, suddenly seeing a bat with a 3-foot wingspan overhead, might have panicked and misjudged its size. It's also possible that he saw an unusually large hammerhead bat, maybe one with like a 4-foot wingspan.
Yeah.
Big, but not totally out of the question, right? It doesn't explain the other things that people have seen. However, what I will say is it's very hard to judge the size of creatures when you're looking just up in the air, not knowing how high they are.
Oh, right, because you don't have a reference point generally.
Right.
Yeah.
Especially if it's something that's happening really fast and you're sort of panicking. It's very easy to look up and be like, oh, this thing is actually 50, 75 feet in the air, but I think it's only 20 to 30 feet in the air, and then that changes the size of what I think it is.
Definitely. Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
But we don't know. I mean, that's a question mark in the history of cryptozoology, right? We don't really know what he saw. He probably saw a big bat. We will do a series on all of the dinosaur myths in Africa because I think it's fascinating, and we'll talk more about the flying animals as well as the Mokele Mbembe and all that cool stuff.
Cool.
But for now, Sanderson, it's important to understand that very early on in his life, his father gets killed by this animal in Africa. Then he's on his own in Africa and has to him, a similar scare, right? This panicked moment of, oh my God, here comes this charging animal at me. This vicious thing that's going to attack me, right?
Yeah.
This incident changes Sanderson forever. Now he's fascinated by the natural world, and he began a lifelong search for animals that existed just outside the perimeter of normal sciences. In World War II, he served with the British Navy intelligence before becoming, as described in his obituary, a press agent in New York City, which I think actually means war correspondent. But the whole time, he's fascinated by unusual animals. And after the war, he gets into what's called the animal business. He calls it the animal business. He's still living in New York, and he begins doing television appearances with animals. Kind of like Brian Fellow's Safari Planet, right? On SNL, right?
Oh, yeah, that's the best sketch, yeah.
Yeah, so he's featured on the program The World Is Yours, which was the first color TV program. And that was described in a CBS press release as a sort of intellectual vaudeville show. He keeps these exotic animals and he shows up on TV shows and he displays them. He talks about them. Maybe they do little tricks if they're like, has a parrot talk to you or something like that, right?
Is this like the 50s again? Like, when is this?
Yeah, this is the 50s. Mm-hmm.
So this is like the last part of Miss Maisel when like the guy is
totally,
on the couch with Gordon.
Yeah,
and,
no, this is 100% that kind of because it's the beginning of those talk shows, right?
Yeah, right.
This would be the programs that you would be watching instead of going to see like a carnival sideshow, right?
Yeah.
At the time, Sanderson is just renting animals from New York and taking them to studios. He does this for a little bit, and then he quickly realizes that renting the animals is a waste of money, and he decides to start buying them himself. He needs somewhere to house his growing collection of co-hosts. And so he purchases 25 acres in Warren Township, New Jersey, from a barbecue restaurant. By the spring of 1954, he opened Ivan Sanderson's Jungle Zoo, which is a roadside attraction. Now, if all this sounds reminiscent of one Joe Exotic, That's because it really is. So Sanderson would take his animals in traveling exhibitions just like Tiger King. And much like the Wynnewood Zoo, Sanderson's establishment ends in tragedy. So a fire in February of 1955 destroyed his barn, and with it, all 45 of his animals.
No, not another fire with killing animals.
I'm sorry. This is a sad episode.
This is sad. Okay.
Later that year, in August, Hurricane Diana caused the Delaware River to flood and all but obliterated what remained of the zoo.
Holy shit.
It had been operational for less than 2 years.
Oh, man.
So, in his free time, Sanderson continued to write. He publishes various books and articles throughout the next 20 years. His 1961 book, The Abominable Snowman Comes to Life, is considered the seminal work on the Yeti, and was the reason that Terry Cullen contacted him about the Iceman. And now, fate is a funny thing, because by literally a completely random chance, when Cullen's call came in, Sanderson was hosting his good friend and fellow cryptozoologist, Bernard Heuvelmans, for a few days. What do you know about Bernard Heuvelmans?
You've mentioned him before.
Yeah.
And I forgot.
Okay. So if Ivan T. Sanderson was responsible for bringing cryptozoology into the public eye, Bernard Heuvelmans was responsible for making the public take it seriously. Heuvelmans is born in France in 1916. He's educated at the Free University of Brussels. The free in this instance means free thinking, not monetarily free.
Ah, okay.
When it was established, most of Belgium's other universities were Catholic, and so that kind of hindered scientific discourse, especially during the Enlightenment of the 1800s. So the Free University had no such religious obligations, and this is where Heuvelmans went to school.
Okay.
He wrote his doctoral dissertation on aardvark teeth before the Nazis started fucking up Europe, right? Sanderson was doing anti-submarine work in the Royal Navy, and Heuvelmans was thrown into a German POW camp in France. Showing his trademark tenacity, Heuvelmans escaped from not one, but 4 fucking POW camps.
Whoa.
Before fleeing to Paris and becoming a comedian and jazz singer.
Holy crap, wow.
Yeah.
I feel like that needs a movie.
He really does. He needs a movie. He's a cool dude.
Wow, yeah. Okay.
The war ends. He's been singing in jazz cafes and doing comedy stand-up routines, right?
Yeah.
1948, Heuvelmans comes across an article in the Saturday Evening Post titled, "There Could Be Dinosaurs," about the possibility of living prehistoric animals around the world. And who wrote it? Just some guy named Ivan T. Sanderson. This was the result of Sanderson's encounter with the giant bat, and this growing trend of like, oh, well, maybe there are dinosaurs, right?
Yeah.
So Sanderson writes on this in the Saturday Evening Post. Heuvelmans encounters this. He's a trained biologist. Like legitimately, he went to school. He's a trained biologist. And his world turns upside down basically overnight. This blew his mind. It opened his eyes, right? Heuvelmans, he's a fan of Jules Verne, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, right? And he loves the idea of these extinct animals hiding out in the hidden corners of the world. Trained academic. He begins his own research, and within a few years, he's collected so much evidence on unknown animals that he publishes a book called On the Track of Unknown Animals.
Did he really find unknown animals?
This was what we call armchair research. Okay. So this was him. He wasn't going from place to place. He was collecting reports. He was having interviews. He was talking to people, but he wasn't actually traveling from place to place.
Okay, gotcha. Okay.
I'm not sure I can explain how important On the Track of Unknown Animals was for cryptozoology. To say that it's the single most important book ever published on the study is not hyperbole. The thing is, Heuvelmans applied his scientific rigor to the questions of these animals. He's got thorough research. He's got citations. He's doing it in an academic way that no one has done it before. Sanderson's not doing this, right? The book It reads like a scholarly article, but it feels kind of like a fireside conversation with an intellectual. Like you feel like you're in his living room and he's talking about these experiences that he's researched on and like, oh, this. And then his thoughts and his theories on it of like, well, you know, we see these giant whale type things that don't fit into the regular cetacean biology. I think maybe there could still be existent mosasaurs in the oceans in the world, those sorts of things, right? Yeah. It's very, very theoretical, but again, it's all backed with this is what it would take for a mosasaur to survive.
Okay.
Something like that.
That's
He's talking
awesome.
about like, oh, would there be breeding populations? Would there be food? Would there be all of these things, right?
Yeah.
He knows the questions to ask. He catapulted cryptozoology into a science and coined the term cryptozoology in the process.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah.
All right.
So he's talking to researchers all over the world about their findings, about their encounters, about the animals that they're like, this doesn't fit with the regular biology that I know, but something happened to me, right? I saw something that just doesn't fit. That brings him to Ivan T. Sanderson.
Okay.
There's a bunch more to talk about with these two guys, right? But we'll cover things like biovortices and Yeti skulls and stuff like that in other series, okay? For now, let's focus on their friendship. Heuvelmans had cited Sanderson several times in his Unknown Animals book, and they'd shared research notes through paper mail and over the phone. So they're colleagues and they really respect each other. Sanderson is older than Heuvelmans, so even though Heuvelmans is the better educated of them, he looks up to Sanderson and Sanderson's research, especially because Sanderson has been like out in the world traipsing through Africa looking for things, right? Heuvelmans' devotion to scientific rigor was somewhat at odds with his own belief on the subject, okay? Like, he believed that research and presentation was important, but he also believed that the scientific community had, like, let their own preconceptions get in the way. We talk about this, right?
Yeah,
Like, it's again that idea of shutting down just because you are a skeptic. You say, well, that doesn't exist because we have no evidence of it, so there's no reason to look into it.
Yeah, it's silly to even look into that.
Yeah, this is the education that he grew up with, and this frustrates him. And he felt like mainstream science took too narrow a view of the world, especially when it came to the existence of new species. Heuvelmans put a lot of stock in things like local tradition, folklore, mythology, and his opinion was basically everything comes from somewhere. So you track back in this mythology and you say, okay, the Thunderbird, say, of the Native American peoples of Western United States. Why are they talking about this big bird in the sky? Where did this come from? There must be a genesis of this idea somewhere. Is this a pterodactyl that was still around? Is this a giant eagle? What was the origin of this story? That's what he's trying to find.
I think that's really awesome.
It's important, right? Yeah. And then you follow and you say, okay, well, the oral tradition continued. Can we now draw any conclusion about the modern version of this mythology?
Right.
Sanderson, on the other hand, he's this uneducated cryptozoology pop star, okay? He has an even deeper contempt for the mainstream. He's been featured on TV shows, right? He's showing off his animals, and then more recently, he's been writing papers on things like the Yeti, the Sasquatch, that sort of thing, and coming on these programs and talking about, oh, I believe that there's a hairy man beast in Nepal.
Yeah.
And his view is it's more performance than education. He has this almost like democratic streak that he believes that science should serve the people. And if the people want research on apes in the Himalayas, then science should provide the people with that research.
Sure. Yeah.
His whole view was that science is too wrapped up in itself. And they're not looking to the public to move to the next step.
Yeah, it's not answering questions that people are like I guess the common person is asking.
Yeah, it's kind of this idea where you see it today too, where like intellectualism only ever exists in like the intellectualist higher education type of sphere, but the common man never gets to like buy into that, never gets to contribute to it, and never gets to say like, hey guys, maybe talk about my problems instead.
Yeah, I
right?
mean, it's you kind of have to have like a high degree to get into those circles. There isn't
Exactly.
really a
Yeah.
democracy going on with a lot of that, which
Right.
is a big problem. I think also at the time, thinking of just the world in general and how it was, I bet there were a lot more stones unturned back then than there are today.
Oh, absolutely,
The world was
yeah.
bigger and more mysterious.
Absolutely.
Even then. It's not even that long ago, but it really,
Yeah, you're talking 50 years ago or so, 60 years, yeah.
yeah.
So the two of them, their frustration with their own field drew them together. And one winter in 1968, Heuvelmans finally, after all this conversation back and forth, he finally visits Sanderson in New York City. And he visits just in time to get a call from Terry Cullen, describing this mysterious ape that he saw encased in a block of ice. Terry Cullen explained that the block of ice came from Siberia, where it had been discovered by a Soviet fishing ship. It was then confiscated by the Chinese before resurfacing in Hong Kong, and the current owner purchased it there. Obviously, this intrigues our cryptozoologists. So Sanderson, he has all these contacts from TV, and he starts reaching out through his network of contacts, and within 2 days, he's able to locate the owner of the Iceman, the person who was showing it at the livestock festival. That's Frank D. Hansen of Rollingstone, Minnesota. And Sanderson wrote him a telegram, and he's a little cagey about it. He says, I want to talk about animal acquisition. Not about your Iceman, not about anything like that. He's just like, hey, remember, like, he had the zoo, right? So he's like, hey, I'm a zoo owner. I keep these exotic animals. I want to talk to you about animal acquisition. Heard about you at the livestock fair. Hansen agreed. And just a few days later, Sanderson and Heuvelmans set out on a buddy road trip across 3,000 miles of America, heading for a mysterious creature in the rural countryside of the Midwest. And that's where we'll pick up next time.
Ooh, all right. So this quite, I would say, likely duo of friends.
Yeah. What's most interesting to me is that this is the start, and we're going to see their friendship dissolve.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
This is going to tear them apart.
Yeah. The events that follow are going to destroy their friendship, and it's going to it's going to rock cryptozoology a little bit.
Damn.
Yeah, it's pretty wild. We'll talk about it as it comes, but their differing viewpoints on how to approach the subject matter and how to deal with Frank Hansen, the owner, is going to drive a wedge between the two of them.
That's a shame.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Makes me think of Cope and Marsh.
Very much so. Yeah. Cope and Marsh, the paleontologists. Yep.
Yeah. Very much also kind of the beginnings of this of this whole other scientific field.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of was. I mean, you had Cope and Marsh. Paleontologists didn't exist at the time. They invented paleontology. I guess not invented, but they created the science of paleontology. And they were bitter rivals, even though they should have been friends.
Yeah.
But they were bitter rivals.
Man, let that be
Yep.
a lesson to all people listening. Like, if you're about to embark on a new scientific field, do not do it with your friends.
Yeah, don't go in with friends. You really shouldn't go into business with friends at all to begin with.
No. No, it's okay if you go into business and then you become friends.
Right.
But, like, you shouldn't just go into business with friends.
Yeah.
Not a good lesson.
Not at all.
This is going to tear us apart one day.
Yeah, tear us apart.
Oh, wouldn't that be a
Just
fun
like
drama to
Sanderson
watch?
and Heuvelmans.
Yeah, just like it. Cool.
So that's the background of the Minnesota Iceman. Next time, we will talk about their journey, and we will talk about Frank Hansen, the owner, and the creature itself.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
All right. I have a feeling it wasn't really found in Siberia.
To be clear, I said it at the top, but just to reiterate again, the Iceman wasn't real. It was a gaffe. It was a hoax. But it's fascinating to see things unravel around this story.
Huh.
And
Okay.
the only reason that we know that for sure only came out about a decade ago.
The reason... You mean like us finding out that it wasn't real for sure?
Yes.
Only came out a decade ago?
Yes.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
Up until then, honestly, up until I think 2012, there was debate over whether it was real or not.
Okay.
And there's still some debate today, but
there's always going to be.
There's always going to be some debate. Yeah.
It's kind of like the smoking gun with like, well, it's a smoking gun to me, but like the fact that Adamski definitely used like a lantern.
Yes. Very clearly.
But there are still people that believe that was an alien ship.
Yeah, and there's a similar... And the thing is, people tend not to believe that picture was an alien ship, but they believe that he was having experiences and just faked some photos, and they were unrelated. There's a similar sort of narrative surrounding the Iceman, where, like, the fake one that we have is not necessarily the one that they examined. Yeah. Right? And there's actually a very specific reason why people believe that we'll get into in the next episode. Okay. But, yeah.
Cool. Very cool.
There you go.
All right. There you go. So, don't go wading into the African rivers.
No, and don't step on a turtle if you do.
Dude, I thought
Poor turtle.
He's lucky that that's all that happened to him.
He is.
I was ready for you to be like, okay, and 10 crocodiles took him down, and then a hippo sat on him, and like he got off easy in that river. Yeah. All right. Thanks for listening, everybody.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. Talk to you later. No, we won't talk to you later. I'll talk to him later, but you all just, yeah.
Well, they'll be around. We can say talk to you later.
I will talk to them, but it won't be like back and forth.
No. You'll listen later.
Yeah, you'll listen later.
We'll be back.
Yes, we will, I guess.
Be safe out there.
Unless we hate each other. Bye.
Bye. Thanks for listening to Slaying Monsters. If you like the podcast and what we do, please share it with others or leave us a rating and review. For questions, suggestions, and other feedback, reach out to us, slayingmonsterspodcast@gmail.com, and stay up to date by following us on Instagram @slayingmonsterspodcast. Your support helps us grow, and we are truly grateful to have our listeners and community.